talking about the need for a building for our Gallatin College MSU programs that are growing by leaps and bounds, talking about the need for us to do something about our wool lab, which is this tiny little dilapidated white wooden building that we have right in the heart of campus. And yet the research that comes out of that little building is very important. It's only one of two in the nation. So we were just talking about that, and perhaps the biggest concern in our horizon was planning for the size of our commencement ceremonies, because we were going to graduate the largest class in the history of Montana State University. Yes, in the back of our minds, we were also planning for coronavirus. Actually, my son, who's a physician back in Puerto Rico, had called me in mid-January and asked me to cancel a flight that I was supposed to take the next day, Brian, because he was concerned about the surge that was happening with coronavirus. So we were planning ahead. When we went to the Board of Regents meeting in March, we were setting up a webpage about coronavirus, frequently asked questions, and starting to envision what we thought were going to be orderly plans. I left Dillon, the Board of Regents meeting in Dillon, and then headed out to Boise, Idaho. And in Boise, we were going to celebrate, and this transitions us to March. We were going to celebrate the Big Sky championship, basketball championship. And your university, of course, had the top-seeded women basketball team. We were able to watch a victory. And literally, we were getting ready to see the Bobcats play again when we received the notification that the conference had called to cancel the tournament, that NCAA had asked all conferences around the nation to cancel the conference. So right there in that unceremonious fashion, we just finished our presentation and started driving back home. And a couple of days later, I received a phone call from the Commissioner of Higher Education letting me know that there was a confirmed case of coronavirus in the meeting that we had been before, the week before. And then less than 24 hours later, he texted me to say that actually he had tested positive for coronavirus. So that's when everything really precipitated. The governor asked all of us who had been in attendance at that meeting, all 105 people, to quarantine. I need to send a big shout out to John Hill and Bozeman Deaconess, because he immediately reached out to us to see if there was anything that we needed at the university. And that's when we started the long days that all of you also experience, right? Days with 14, 18 hours in front of a screen like this one, and making all sorts of decisions. Many of those decisions you are aware. We canceled the NCUR, the National Conference on Undergraduate Research. We were expecting over 4,000 young people coming from every state in the union. And the heartbreaking thing was that we had a group planning that event for over 4 years. And all of a sudden it dissipated. The big lift during that week was to move all 3,000 courses online. Think about this. From face-to-face presentation to online in just 1 week. We also started making some quick decisions about policies because parents were panicking quickly. So we sent a reassurance to students, letting them know that if they wanted this was voluntary, rather than opt for a letter grade, they could choose to have a pass or fail approval. And then we also learned that some of our schools from our K-12 were confronting problems with the admission tests. So we made all ACT testing optional from this point forward. It has always been optional at the Montana University system, all the campuses, but certainly the regions wanted to make sure that the public understood that that was the case. We then proceeded with a lot of restrictions in our buildings. We moved out many of our students, the majority of our students that were in residences at Montana State. Just to give you an idea about the size of that decision, just in reimbursements for residence halls alone, we dispersed more than $7 million on that aspect alone. To that, you also need to add other type of reimbursements that we're still dealing with. The big question was, why are you still keeping students in residence halls? The answer is clear. Not only the governor had asked us to do that, it is true that some of our students have no other place to go. And for them, that residence hall room is home to them. So thankfully, they were absolutely fantastic. And I think that working together, you saw how Gallatin County started being the hot spot of the state of Montana. And all of a sudden we were able to address that curve and bring it down. And then finally, on that note, just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated our commencement ceremonies by college. They were virtual, and it is our big hope that we can invite as many of those students to come back in December to celebrate an in-person commencement ceremony. So that moves us to the future. Right now, as you saw in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle today, Gail Chancellor joined us yesterday at our Reconstitution Committee. Our Reconstitution Committee just organizes 7 additional subgroups that work under that, anything and everything from academics, housing, dining, sanitization of public places and buildings, testing and tracking, athletics, all that is there. Every little detail is being considered as we start thinking about the fall. Right now, we are in our first session in the summer. That session is completely online, but then starting on June the 29th, we have our second summer session. And for that one, we will have some in-person courses. We want to use that as a drill to learn about what things do we need to consider in terms of foot traffic and other things. The big questions that I know that some people are asking is about what happens with fall sports. More clearly, what happens with football. We are still just planning ahead. That decision ultimately also comes from NCAA that will provide guidance. And there will be a meeting of the Big Sky Athletic Conference where a vote will be taken in order to make that decision. So, Daryl, I was thinking about some lessons learned, and I have a few here, just 4. Number 1, when all this started, I was telling my family, I have never served in my life, but the onset of this situation quickly made me feel that I was just barely hanging on a surfing board, but it was the tidal wave of history that was really in control. The second I learned is that this situation is like writing a book in chapters, right? You need to narrate for the public, you need to contextualize, but every time you release a new chapter, people immediately want to know what happens next and how does this end, right? And third, the other lesson is you run out of the good decisions pretty quickly. And the only thing that is left behind are the tough decisions. And last but not least, this has been a very rewarding experience because I have had an opportunity to work very closely with many of you. All these decisions are being made in coordination with the governor's office, with the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education, reaching out to the city of Bozeman, our county, our Bozeman Public Schools. I need to say publicly, I love that GRIS, that it's there. Thank you, Bob Connors, for all your help. Brian Springers, thank you so much for your updates. Daryl, at some of my darkest hours, I just pick up that phone and I call Daryl and ask for his help and guidance, and he's always there. And also John Hill and all of you. So I hope that helps with what you needed, Daryl, from me.
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you very much, President Cusado. And again, as always, I know now how to get a hold of you very easily, and you know how to get a hold of me. So thank you for working with me during these times, and then we will be here. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for your leadership at Montana State University and all you do for our economics here in Gallatin County and Bozeman.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You. Next up, of course, maybe I should let you introduce Bob Connors. But Bob, I won't do that to you. I'll spare you that. So
I appreciate that. Now, Dr. Cusado and I, we have such a good back and forth with ours. And like I always tell her, we always need a safety school for those kids that can't get into Missoula. So it's nice to have Bozeman here. Last grid shot I'm going to take today. So go Cats go. How's that? There we go. Where we were at is very similar to what the MSU went through as we started this process. Is that PowerPoint show up? Okay. And so where we want to go is to the PowerPoint so that I can actually share it and figure out what I'm doing. All right, so guess what? You got to look at me. So sorry about that. So where we were at, so I have this great graphic, and Mark Twain said, out of public schools grows the greatness of a nation. And I think that nothing was more represented this year than what happened. So as we were going through life, in February, we're looking at the state tournaments. We did get swimming off, ended up being state champs in that. We're looking forward to spring break. We've got, I'm heading to Boston for a conference. We've got other people going to Mexico. We've got some people going to Hawaii. We're just really looking forward to breaking out of the snow and getting just some fresh breathing air and go through some things. We're working on an impact grant that is redefining how we're looking at that 8 to 4 in our elementary schools. Continuing to work with Dr. Nell, our reading specialist. Things are going really well. We're looking at our tests, our ACTs for our juniors, our AP tests for our advanced placement students, high set for our non-traditional. And the funniest one, and saddest one for that is our driver's ed, because, we have to limit that anyway. What happened with that, as a side note with that, is, you have to have 6 hours of drive time and 12 hours of seat time in a car. Well, you can't do that in what we ended up on March 14th, I guess, is when we got that message. We were here, they having our tournaments, and everything got canceled that night. Friday night. And so we're basically normal day-to-day operations going through things. And then this hit. And so you go back and you look at public schools, and, Boston Latin was the first public school, and that was in 1635. So the first school was opened up in 1635. Montana, Virginia City had a first public school classes in March of 1866. So you're looking at the same structure of education in Montana since March of 1866 And we go into spring break in 1 extra week, and we're asking our teachers to completely redo their business, what we're trying to get done, how we're trying to deliver instruction, what that's going to look like. And all those people that my age people or even younger, dragging their feet a little bit on this, technology wave. Well, I'll get out of it before I really need to use it. And boy, oh boy, we're going to jump into the deep end and get some things done with it. So our teachers began to develop lessons for virtual learning, computer-based, and then you have that fine line of not only they're too young to do computer-based, but they may not have access to computer-based. So we had to develop packets. How are we going to deliver our food? A lot of our kids, even though we're pretty well off here in Bozeman, we do have a lot of kids that rely on the school district for breakfast and lunch. How are we going to get those kids those 2 meals a day that they were counting on? So HRDC and our food service got together, figured out a plan, and put those boots on the ground and got those breakfast and lunch out to those kids. And that allowed 0 to 18 to have free breakfast and lunch. So we were excited about that. We were developing how are we, we can't, as a public entity, a public school, we can't force people to buy technology. So we buy it. And so we had to figure out how are we going to deliver that to our students. And so social distancing, computer pickup, what does that look like? And then the central office here, we started collaborating with the AAs to share our ideas on the new normal, because when you have to put things into perspective, our middle schools are as big as, one middle school is as big as most of the Class B districts, the whole district K-12. And so our mindsets are completely different than what was happening in one of the bigger schools in Glasgow, which is a Class B school, Manhattan, which is another bigger Class B school. It's totally different because one of our schools is that same size. So how do we scale this delivery of information? How do we do that and still maintain a sense of normalcy for our kids? And, once March 30th hit, we hit the ground running. And I'm so proud of our teachers and administrators and our staff for getting these, flipping the whole grid from March of 1800 to now, where all of a sudden we're not a brick and mortar. We're not in that 30 by 30 room. We're on our own. We don't know what that looks like. Once May hit, we started to relax a little bit. We started to understand what that new normal is, and started looking, okay, can we pull graduation off? Well, so we start talking with the other AAs and working with the health departments. Okay, let's give us, what are the parameters? Well, Missoula's pretty tight on their parameters. Butte got loose. And so we had 8 different counties working on what this looks like, because we have the largest graduating class of 508 in the state. Billings West is next at 400. You had some other elements that go into this decision too, because in Butte, they have the Civic Center. In Billings, they have the Metra, and Great Falls, they have Four Seasons Arena. Well, those are county, city-owned properties. So that's a different mindset to go through. We can look at our outdoor stadiums, our football stadiums, and try to get some things done. Or we could look at Carroll, MSU, and U of M. What do those things look like? Well, the Helena is in a different state because Carroll's basketball arena isn't as big as some of their high school arenas. And so that took that off the plate. The social distancing, if you don't have a mezzanine, you can't create that. The Metro has a mezzanine, where Butte Civic Center has a mezzanine, that upper level. The Brick has a mezzanine, but we have 508. We don't have 250 like Great Falls. So how many people can you invite to these things? This is a celebration of an unbelievable year. Not only that, but as a culmination of their 13 years of public education that got them to this point. We want to make sure that they go through some things. So with the help of Dr. Cruzado and MSU, we were able to come up with the first outdoor plan. Butte decided to go with the Civic Center and 2 guests. Billings went with the Metra and 2 guests. Great Falls, because there wasn't a mezzanine level, they didn't have anybody in their graduation ceremony, so just the kids were in there. We wanted to make sure that we could get that done. We tried to do it at Van Winkle. It just wasn't big enough. Matt Kelly didn't feel comfortable enough, so we were able to work with MSU, and we're in Bobcat Stadium. We have the luxury of being the last graduation of the AA's on June 7th. So we're going to learn a lot from what Billings started on May 24th and through all the other 13 school graduations. So we're excited. We're able to do that. We're able to celebrate our seniors and have them go off and celebrate that accomplishment of, unbelievable things. And then we begin that phase 2. We get Governor Bullock comes in and says on June 1st, we're going to be in phase 2. Okay, we know what phase 3 looks like because we've done that since Virginia City days in March. And now we're looking at phase 1. We know how to do that because we just did that. So what is phase 2 going to look like? So we put together a task force of 7 different things here at Bozeman School District that talks about instruction, special education, safety, athletics, personnel, what the buildings are looking like, and most importantly, how can we be financially, fiscally responsible when this money comes, because we're going to have to add a lot of different stations, possibly some PP&E as we go on and through this. So what is that going to look like? Not only that, what are the mental hurdles that we're going to have as we come back to buildings? As a lot of you business owners understand, how that some people are very comfortable coming into your business with no mask, or very comfortable with masks, or they don't come. And so those are going to be our 3 things that we're going to have to identify is, what are we going to do with the kids that aren't coming back? What are we going to do with the kids that don't understand that social distancing? So we have a lot of things we're trying to figure out. Are we going to have a blended instruction with student rotation, or are we going to have, we don't even know. The positive thing coming out as we move to our normal is Bozeman will be hosting the Montana Special Olympic Summer Games beginning in 2021 for a couple years. So that'll get us back to that sense of normalcy. Our school district is looking at all sorts of ways to get our summer camps going. That's on the forefront right now. Where are we at with, we have so many community partners with our different fields and tennis courts and tracks and different things that they utilize for their camps, so that we can get back to everybody working for your businesses, because now they'll have a place for their kids to go. So we're continually working on that, trying to figure out what that's going to look like. And hopefully we'll have some answers real soon. But as what Ed said earlier, I don't have a crystal ball either. I can't forecast that future, but we're doing and looking at the data to make our best guess to what it's going to look like. So hopefully we'll have some answers as far as our summer camp goes, as far as our workouts for our athletic teams and different things like that coming up real soon. But I want to thank everybody for their piece in this, getting Gallatin County, getting Bozeman through this very difficult time. I don't know what we would have done without the health department, without Matt Kelly's input. He's been phenomenal, very understanding, very calming, laying out why or why not we do these things. And it's been an educational piece, and it's been really interesting. The good thing that we have learned to jump on board is education. Public education is not going to look the same, and that's a good thing. We are going to make sure that we harness some of the things that we learned this spring through our offsite learning and utilize those good things in our, in our future. what can that look like? How can we best utilize the tools that we learned, the techniques that we developed? How can we utilize that as we continue to have our instruction and continue to be on the cutting edge of education in the Northwest? Daryl, thanks for allowing me to come in and have this time with everybody. Everybody have a great day. And if there's any questions, please shoot an email and I'll get those answers to you.
Good, Bob. Thanks for your leadership too, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here too. And I know opening a second high school probably in the middle of this isn't the easiest thing to do either, but thank you again for your leadership at the school district and what you do for our education.
We're opening a second, what? Oh yeah, that second school too. Yeah, that's on there too, isn't it? Yeah, we have to do that. And July 1 looks like when we'll get that certificate of occupancy. So hopefully we'll have double the facilities if we're allowed to get into them in July. So thanks for reminding me, Daryl. I forgot all about that one.
Yeah, just another thing to add to your list. So.
Yeah. Oh, Bozeman High rentals starting. And so it's really, as far as the buildings and things go, you know, it's been great. So I appreciate all that with help with the bonds and the levies and things that couldn't make our life any easier. And you guys do a great job of helping us promote that. So thanks again for that.
Thank you. With that, up next, Brian, you want to give it a shot?
Hello, everyone. So we were very much like President Cruzado said, in late January, we started seeing the indications of, very early indications of what we had no idea was coming. You know, the international travel to the United States was starting to be restricted from China. And, you know, we started watching that. You know, initially we thought, well, that'll have a big impact on international travel to Yellowstone for the summer. But we weren't sure how that would develop as, you know, as it moved worldwide. Really by about the end of February was when we started to really watch what was happening in Italy. Italy was starting to shut down, and they were shutting down very quickly. And that started us to get an idea of what might be coming here now that it had gone from Asia over to Europe. And when we looked at that, we started kind of looking at what we would need to be preparing for. And we actually had meetings in DC. I was in DC just the week before everything kind of hit the fan. And, you know, with senators and representatives, and it was just starting to really kind of hit home of what was starting to become a very big thing in our future. When we got to about the 12th of March, we had a presentation for our board that we basically said, this is where we think is worst case scenario, what is going to happen. And so I'm going to switch now to kind of a presentation style, hopefully, and show you what we had shown to our board. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and start this. So when we started, this was where we were. We were having a really great year going into January and February. Despite the information that we were seeing coming down the road, we were up 16% for the first 2 months over record numbers the previous year. The ski season was going great up at Big Sky. Just everything was kind of in order. We were working on our terminal project, knowing that we were going to have more planes than ever before coming up this summer, and hoping to get the terminal done just in time for all that additional traffic. And then March happened, and we were quickly impacted. I think, one of the things that I think as a community, we need to really thank both President Cruzado as well as Taylor Middleton up at Big Sky, making some very, very difficult decisions. And while that took a big hit on our traffic, I think it was, absolutely the right decisions for our community. And, I think that's why we are where we are now on the uphill swing, is because of two of the really the most hardest decisions I can imagine for anybody to make. And I'm, proud to know both of you for making those decisions. So there was March. And, at this point, the big change for us on our projections was we didn't expect it to happen quite as early in March. We thought it would be closer to the 1st of April before we would really be hit. But other than that, we have been pretty close to our projections. Here was April. We were at 97% down for the month of April for passenger traffic. That took us back essentially 50 years to about 1970 was the last time we saw traffic in that level. Going into May, or going into this is just kind of a comparison you can see here before I get into May. There's been a bit of misconception that while the airport, the terminal traffic was slowing down dramatically, that on the business aviation and private jet side, that everybody rich and famous was coming to Montana to get away from everything. And that couldn't be further from the truth. While it wasn't quite as much dramatic in April, it was still a substantial decline in business jet traffic. So that was not what we were seeing. We were seeing just a complete decimation of traffic to the airport for the month of April. So this was what we had for flights. This is basically our May 6th schedule. We had destinations, 4 destinations. We had pared everything back to really key destinations for Delta, United, American, and Alaska. We were down to about 6 or 7 flights a day for most of the month. We're starting to see a little bit of additions through that time. But compared to April's 3%, we're ecstatic to see 8 to 12% of normal now. Never would have thought I'd be so excited for that. Going into June, we're seeing obviously some additions as well, but mostly on the non-daily side for June. So we're seeing Phoenix Mesa return, Las Vegas return. Ironically, we're seeing our first nonstop to Nashville on Allegiant, actually inaugurated at this time. And thankfully, we also had in line Sun Country Airlines coming in from Minneapolis, and they will begin next Wednesday. And for the next month, they will be the only service to Minneapolis. So we're certainly glad to see them. But despite all the additions here, we're still expecting our June passenger traffic to only be in about the 15 to 20% of normal range. So we're still really slowly trudging back to something closer to normal. Going into July, I think I'm going to finally be a little bit more optimistic. You're seeing here return of additional nonstop year-round service with San Francisco, LA, Chicago, and Minneapolis returning on Delta. So we will be, by the middle of July, we'll have about 8 of our 9 year-round daily destinations back to our schedule. We'll also add Long Beach nonstops back in July. And right now, it appears that we may see our Boston inaugural flight in July on JetBlue. Despite all of this, we're still only seeing passenger projections in the 30 to 35% of normal range for July. So while it's something we're looking forward to, we're still very much down from where we were. Ironically, while we're at that percentage of flights and such, we will actually be utilizing all of our gates that we have in operation right now. What we are seeing is that the airlines have paired their schedules and they're operating only at peak times, and they all want to be here at the same time. So we're going to be a very empty terminal for a couple of hours. We'll be very busy for an hour or two, and then we'll be empty again for another portion of the day. So going into the projections into the rest of the year, and these are actually what we projected back in March, and we've refined them and relooked at them several times. And so far, we still feel very comfortable with this. There might be a slight uptick as long as we don't have a resurgence of the virus. But as you can see, it's a slow trudge back to closer to what we were by the end of the year. Going into the next year, what we are seeing right now is we're thinking we'll be at about 89% of normal of our record next year. And because of all the strong growth that we've had over the past couple of years, this actually only takes us back to about the 2018 passenger levels. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, we're starting to see a return. It's going to be slow, and it's going to be, you know, something that, you know, we have to watch how the virus reacts as we re-enter society. But you're also seeing Disney open up in July 11th, I believe it is. And if you'd heard me speak earlier, we had said a long time ago, a couple of months ago, it seems like a long time ago, that when Disney returns, then we're on the way back to recovery. So that's kind of where we are at the airport. Just an update a little bit on the terminal project. That is going well. We did accelerate a portion of the project because of the timing. We're doing a lot of things around the airport, like a lot of areas, to, you know, basically take advantage of a time that we never get, and that's a time without people and cars. It's incredible to be able to stripe a parking lot that isn't full. So, you know, I think like many of us throughout the area, you have to make hay while the sun shines, and we're trying to do our best to do that so that we're ready for the eventual return. And I think one other thing that I think a lot of the lessons learned that President Cruzado said, I would say those are very good lessons. I would say also one other lesson is that the resilience of Montana is always evident. And, you know, we've had crises before, and we're getting through this, and I think we'll come out very strong in the end. Unfortunately, we've got to go through a little bit of pain, or quite a bit of pain, and for many of us to get there, but we're on our way. So I think I got you on schedule, Daryl.
That's okay, Brian. Thank you again. Take time out of your schedule, and glad to get that update to see where we're at. So it's been, like I said, a very strong partnership all the way around for the community to support. And I'm just glad the construction can continue on, and you're able to serve in that capacity to continue to move forward when we do see a turnaround in here. So again, thanks for all you do for Bozeman, Gallatin County, and our air service coming in and watching out for us and keeping us included. So again, thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah, thank you.
I should probably say, I don't know if anybody else has been in their job 10 years, but President Cruzado and I laughed that we had bosses, I think years ago, said, you know, you should leave before year 10, because if you stay after that, President Cruzado, is that true? You're laughing there.
That is so true.
So I don't know if we have to start year 1 all over again, and you're in that too, so.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to be part of the 10-year club, but I really was hoping for a better celebration this year.
I thought so too. So with that, I want to thank you again and welcome Mayor Chris Mell. Thank you again for our conversations during this time, and get an update from the city of Bozeman. And thanks for your leadership at the mayor role. So thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Well, thank you, Daryl. And can you give me a thumbs up? Can you hear me okay? We doing all right? Great. So thanks to Daryl and the Chamber for organizing this, and obviously all of the speakers and those joining us. What a thing to go after President Cruzado, Superintendent Connors, and then Director Springer. You guys can all go get your lunch now while I talk. I think I've gone after Brian 4 or 5 times in a row, and it's just not fair because he always does such a great job, and then I try to maintain anyone's attention for what's left for it. So, but real quickly, I want to talk about 3 things. One is the coordination and working together that we've had in this community, which is made me prouder than ever to be from Bozeman and Gallatin Valley. Talk a little bit about economic development, and then end focusing on Daryl, our assignment of talking about our fiscal situation, where we are in the budget. And so first, just wow, what a situation where 3 months seems like 3 years or 3 decades. I'm also part of the Decade Club. Took office in January of 2010. So perhaps we should be apparently having cocktail hour more often than we thought in terms of our getting together. But we started off with a bang. Gallatin County was a leader in a way that none of us wanted to be in terms of the number of COVID cases. But what happened after that has been, frankly, just quite impressive, if not remarkable. And that is that the community came together. Leadership by Matt Kelly and the county, from Three Forks down to West Yellowstone, the university, obviously Bozeman Health and the hospital, and everyone. There are too many people to list them all. So I just mentioned the tip of the iceberg in terms of what people have done together. And frankly, we earned the opportunity as a community, as a state, to go to phase 2 on Monday. And that's a real opportunity for us. But it comes because of all the hard work that you've started to hear already from speakers and that you're going to hear from others down the road. So a big thanks. And as I have said many times, I've never been prouder to say that I'm from this community than what's happened in the last couple of months. People have come together to take care of those who are suffering, and there is a lot of pain out there, but also to look for ways that we can safely reopen and get back to where we were before, whether it's the fall semester for MSU, or trying to make what we can of the summer tourism season, or just small businesses across the community. And I think that's a real theme for us. We are a crossroads community. There aren't many in the country that have, well, there's only one in the world that has the first world's national park next to it, combined with Big Sky, obviously a growing and thriving airport in the long run, but at the same time, towns like Three Forks and others that are still, in a sense, the heart of Montana, or what the Montana is in many ways compared to Bozeman, which is really in some ways a cosmopolitan city. And that crossroads of combining a major research institution at the university with a growing tech hub, with a retail hub because we serve so many areas, as well as a health center, really isn't often replicated. And so it's not surprising that we saw cases here, but it's also a tribute to how well people have adapted to each other. They may have lived here for 5 generations or 5 years or 10 years apparently in office, but they adjust well and they embrace the community. And I think that's because of the institutions that are here and the hard work that people do. I was just talking to some folks from Bloomberg cities this morning and trying to explain to our East Coast friends about that this is an ingrained Montana way. We didn't invent the cliche public-private partnership, but because we were doing it, I would say generations before that was the case. It's always been that way, and frankly, it has to be, whether it's working with the chamber or cooperating with HRDC and everyone in between. Our resources are finite. Our county, and I think Don's going to go after me, we are bigger than the state of Delaware and twice the size of Rhode Island in terms of our geographic scope. And that's quite a lot of area to bring together into one thing. And it's been done, and it's been done well. And so Bozeman's played a small role in that, and I'm proud of our role, but mostly I'm proud of how we did it together and want to thank everyone for that. And moving into the second part, economic development, I think that's especially seen by what happened when this crisis started. Businesses across the spectrum, whether they were making backpacks or fishing gear or equipment for pets, dropped everything and started to make PPE, started to make masks. They basically saw the need and they acted and they addressed it. Obviously doing something that was important, but often acting before they told anyone. You know, I had several calls where a business owner would call me and say, hey, we started this yesterday. Just wanted you to know. I mean, they took it upon themselves to address the need, and that entrepreneurial spirit is invaluable to our community. And so because of that, we were able to not only help people in this community, but for example, Sims was giving PPE to hospitals across the state that needed it, that weren't fortunate to have a Sims in their backyard the way we were, or a West Paw, or a mystery ranch. And so, and there's so many others, but they just took it upon themselves to act. And that is so important to me, that creativity that they had, and then coordinating and cooperating with the rest of us to end up with a better community is invaluable. In terms of economic development, again, I think the story is the same, whether it's Chris Nauman and Daryl Schlem working with Britt Fontenelle on opening kits to help businesses reopen, the dashboard that they're creating with Prospera, Rob Gilmore and others, in terms of showing what our unemployment rates are, how we're doing on a number of important sectors, so the community can understand what's our economic health, how is that different than a week ago, are we improving, are we treading water, what areas still need work, will be invaluable. Rob, who I mentioned, did a survey of businesses are they laying off, how open are they, what are the biggest concerns. It's really helped us as we look to go forward. The delegation and the governor have stepped up in a major way. It's really wonderful to live in a small population state, to be able to be on first name basis with all 4 of those officials that are representing us statewide, and the responsiveness we can get working with all of them on small business relief, general help is, I think, outstanding, and we've been able to take advantage of that while obviously working with the school district and the airport and the university. And so I think we've earned this opportunity, and again, it's an opportunity for businesses to lead the way. There's a real chance here. Am I doing okay on sound? Yep. There's a real chance here for the businesses, because they are opening, and Matt Kelly says that they're doing it right with best practices, that they can be the leaders in our community, showing how we open safely, how we progress, and do we get back to a sense of normal and start to address some of that pain that's in our community here. And then lastly, I want to talk a bit about the budget for the city. It was released today. I know all of the communities across Montana will be going through this because our fiscal years by state law all start on July 1st. So we set some budgets and then we adjust as we get evaluations and through it. I just want to show people the manager's budget is coming out. It looks like Edward's phone is unmuted. When that comes out, we'll go through a month-long process of hearings and public input and hear from a lot of people on this call and others. The city commission, the 5 of us together, will take that input, and by the end of the month, we will come up with a budget for the coming year. It's certainly well aware of the economic pain and difficulty, whether you're a worker, entrepreneur, or a business owner. There are hard times, and our budget will respond accordingly, emphasizing public safety and health. I think what you're going to see basically is us try to respond to that, lower our sights, and probably follow a 5-step process. And that would be 1, forecasting, as Daryl asked about. When we looked at our 3rd quarter of the fiscal year, which was January, February, and March, things were going pretty well. For us, property taxes, gas tax is down about by half, and so that'll affect our ability for road construction. But our property taxes are pretty stable, and we're going to probably see a lot of pain this year and next year. In the 07-08 budget, it was actually the second year's budget that was much more difficult than the first year's, because there was a cumulative impact over time. And so I think we need to make some smart choices this year to cut back. It won't mean that we make additional choices next year if that continues to be ready for that. We're not in a situation of, say, some of the Columbus, Cincinnati, or Cleveland and Ohio that have been hit by a dramatic loss in their tax revenue, where they're laying off a third or a half of their employees. I know Aurora, Colorado is in the same boat, but we will be making cuts. And so we'll do forecasting. We'll do that quarterly and share that with everyone. Kristen Donald, our finance director, will come before us, as she did, to talk about the 3rd quarter every 3 months to give updates. Second, we're going to look for ways, as I said, to reduce spending, whether it's cutting down on small projects or materials, hiring freezes, other steps like that. Third, we're going to work with our community development office, the planning department, engineering office, to try and get those projects that have been submitted through as quickly as possible through the city, so that we can put the private sector to work, building and constructing things that are in the pipeline. That's good for the commercial side, it's good for the residential side, it's good for our affordable housing issue, and it's a way that we can work hand in hand with the private sector to try and bring back some vitality to our area, while we're also working with tourism and small businesses and the like. And then 4th, we'll engage. We'll have meetings every Monday in June about the budget. We welcome comment. My phone number is 581-4992, Anyone can call it. It's listed on the city webpage. It's not a secret. People should text me. Please put your name down if you text me so I know who you are. If we haven't talked before, just I occasionally get some offers for coffee at 10 o'clock and don't know who's calling me. But it's a good thing that we are available and we engage. And then the fifth item is we repeat. We forecast, we look to cut back, we look to engage the private sector, then we look to engage the general public, and then we repeat this process because we know there is uncertainty in the future. We need to do our share to try and support the private sector, to provide those essential safety services. And then we repeat the process as we learn more, and hopefully we improve, but we also dial in more and more as we learn what the budget numbers are, how the private sector is doing, and so forth. So thank you, Daryl. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, and I look forward to the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Chris. We appreciate it, and thank Britt and his department, economic development wise. We have the ongoing meetings, and we've kept that up. And again, Chris always takes my call. He still hasn't blocked my phone number. I don't know what he has my name in there under, but thank you for the candid conversations and again, the dialogue and working with you. So appreciate everything you do for the city, and as an elected official, it pays well, I'm sure. So on that note, I'll move on. I'll move on to the next one. And thank you again, Mayor Mel, for joining us today. With that, Commissioner Seifert, Don, are you still down in the basement?
Still in the basement. I was just looking around. I noticed this office with all the paper still may be cleaner than mine. First of all, thanks, Daryl, and thanks for everybody for visiting today. The other presenters, as Mayor Mel said, it's a remarkable group of people that we have that live in this area, and the willingness to step out of their comfort zone and do things is amazing. There were some difficult decisions made in the last couple of months, and looking back, we maybe want to take another stab at some of them, but we did the best we could. So on a personal note, prior to, I wasn't in Boise, but certainly watching the Bobcats in Boise and looking forward to going to Sacramento to the first round of the NCAAs. I was at work and I got a text from a friend of mine who was in Boise, and she said, "We're on our way home." And I was waiting to hear a score from a game or something, and so that's how we found out. But we had a bit of an idea prior to that. We were looking at a marvelous year in Gallatin County. Our growth rate was still where it needed to be, and things were going good. We were looking for a great budget year, looking for great things to happen again. For however many years in a row this has been going on. So we put two levies on the ballot for our 911 system and also for our search and rescue. Looking forward to promoting those and getting a positive response from our public for that. Then I think it was Bob Connors quoted a little bit of literature, and that inspired me. And from the Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, it went from one to the other in hours, really. So we took a look at where we were and to move Gallatin County back to our fundamentals, right? We're required by statute to do health, safety, and the general welfare of the public. And so we begin to look at what are those that were required and are necessary. And we made sure that our sheriff's department our sheriff's office was going to be taken care of, to make sure that we could keep our citizens safe. Our health department obviously stepped up is the player in this whole thing. And our general welfare, we do lots of things that not everybody sees. Our clerk and recorder's office, for example, there's still people being born and still people dying and still real estate transactions that are happening that need to be, the government function needs to happen. So we made sure that those those functions were still going to be working. Same with our treasurer. You know, we collect and we distribute money for numerous special districts, for the school districts, for all of our incorporated cities, for rural improvement districts. We still need to make sure that financial function was still happening. We stretched our IT resources really to the limits. We looked at our essential personnel, and some of them we worked into what we call an A/B shift, right? We take half of them and they would work 1 week, and then the next half the other half would work the next week. So if we did have an incident, a disease, an infection in one of our staffs, we could isolate them for the 2-week quarantine and still have staff working. So we worked an A/B shift. We're still doing that quite a little bit, but we're looking to returning to a normal, whatever that's going to be, work schedule. The other thing that we learned is we learned an entirely new language. We started using words like PPE and phase 1 and phase 2 and Zoom. You know, we always knew how to Google, but now we know how to Zoom. And that word that I'm actually beginning to dislike more and more, the new normal. I'm hoping where we're not it's not the new normal. One thing that was interesting, we fired up our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, and that's sort of this little nondescript building down at the fairgrounds that really became the hub of all the activity. Patrick Lonergan, kudos to Patrick. He's our emergency management person, and believe it or not, somewhere in this county, there's a book that is the Emergency Operations Manual. And you know, that's what we do if we have a flood or if Highlight Dam breaks or if we've got a fire. Somewhere in the deep, dark recesses of that emergency management plan that Patrick has put together is pandemic. Who the heck thought we'd ever get to that stage of the emergency operations plan, but we did, and we pulled it out, and we had a plan to go forward with, and with the great partnerships with the city of Bozeman, the health department, you know, all of our other incorporated cities, all of our other players in this county. We did a marvelous job. I was visiting with a friend of mine who's a commissioner in Daniels County. For those that don't know where Daniels County is, it's up in the northeast corner of the state. It's Scobie, is the county seat. We were visiting, and I said, you know, in an odd way, I'm glad that this happened in Gallatin County, that we were on the leading edge of this, because had that happened in Daniels or Rosebud or Garfield, they would have been overwhelmed. And I'm not saying that it was easy for us, but we had the resources to begin to show other counties the way to handle this. And so in an odd way, the state of Montana is fortunate that this happened in Gallatin County at first. We look at Toole County, Shelby, and the issues that they had. They relied a lot on our health department and the way we were doing business to determine how they would respond up there. So that's been good. Again, Mayor Mel talked about the economic development, this wonderful consortium that we've got going between Prospera and the Northern Rocky Mountain Economics Development District, City of Bozeman, the Chambers of Commerce, the folks up at Big Sky. This is a partnership that we've got going that I hope will remain in effect. You know, one of the philosophies that I live by is that with every challenge is an opportunity. And as we look at this challenge, we see plenty of opportunities, right? I mean, there's good things that can happen out of this, and I'm hoping that we can find those and capitalize on them and become a better community for that. Sort of the nuts and bolts of what the county is doing. We we look at you know, what we do, sort of our cash flow, if you will, and we get paid 2 times a year. We get paid in property taxes in the fall of the year, and then again in the spring. So we were beginning to look at what our spring collection of taxes would be, and how that affects our cash flow in the county, all those nuts and bolts things. As near as we can tell, about 65% of our property taxes are collected via mortgage companies. You know, if you've got a mortgage, you pay your mortgage, they take the property taxes out of there and turn around and pay the county. So, and the other entities, but about 65% of our property taxes are being paid by mortgage companies. And so as we kind of look through that, we believe that we're probably going to have somewhere between a 95 and a 97% payment of our property taxes. So over the last few years, we've been working on in our budgeting process of sustainability and resiliency. And we didn't expect to have to use it this year in February. We didn't think we'd have to use some of those, but we're going to have to. Last year, we gave our employees a very substantial raise, about 6%, to bring them back in line with what we thought. This year, we're not going to be giving any raises. We've made that decision already. And elected officials, because of a strange quirk in the laws, if elected officials don't get a raise, our sheriff's deputies, because elected officials are tied to the sheriff and the sheriff are tied to the deputies don't get longevity. So elected officials are going to take a $1 pay raise, or potentially, if it's legal, we're going to take a $1 decrease in our wages, just to make sure that that our deputies get their longevity. Our mill levy, I spoke about our mill levy for 911 and search and rescue. By the time the phase 1 went in, and then we begin to get into this whole thing, it was too late to pull those off of the ballot. And that deadline has passed. And so we made the very conscious effort not to go out and promote those. We felt that it would be pretty disingenuous in the state of the economy, to go out and ask our public to vote in favor of those. So we've done no outreach. We've answered questions most certainly, but we've done no outreach in any of that. So one of the things that's out there is the Federal CARES Act. There's $1.25 billion that the federal government put into the state of Montana for COVID-19 relief. We're unsure of how all of that will be distributed and when. And so, because we've got a fairly resilient budget, we've been able to finance all of this interior to our budget with some of our cash reserves. Quite honestly, if we don't, I hope there's nobody from the state on this call. If we don't get any of that CARES money, we'll be fine. Not fine. Let me clarify that. We will get through this, but not without a lot of pain. That money is residing with the state right now. It has to be spent or allocated by the 1st or middle of December, and it's only a directly related to the COVID-19 expenditures that's reimbursable. So, you know, we're going to get through this. I remain positive. I see Matt's on the phone now. Matt has just been through an interesting meeting. Matt, thanks for showing up. Thanks for everything you've done for the county and our people. It's pretty amazing. I'm glad you were on our side of the ball this trip. So Anyway, that's it. We are, as we go to phase 2, we're looking to open up and have a little bit more public-facing offices to the city or to our public. We're learning, like I said, every opportunity or every challenge is an opportunity. We're looking more at how we can use technology to interface with our customers and how we can do things better online. It's been learning. I jokingly say, it's really not a joke. We've been talking for the last few years about sometime in the future, people are going to be working from home and they're going to be telecommuting, and we need to prepare and we need to look at how we're going to do this. But we never put a date on it, and it turns out it wasn't 2015 or 2027. It was March 18th. We decided that we're going to have to learn how to telecommute and work from home. There's been some fits and starts, but I think we've done well. We've learned a lot. We're getting better as we go. And now I see we're on a Zoom meeting with 136 people. And that's pretty amazing that can happen. And the technology is good. And the exciting thing is that 3 years from now or 4 years from now, we're going to look at the technology that we're using that we think is so wonderful. And we're going to look at it and look back at it and say, that was pretty archaic. How did we ever do it? So the opportunity for increasing our technology footprint is great, and it's a challenge, but there's opportunities, and we're doing the best we can. So anyway, I'll take questions when it's time. Thanks.
Don, thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership, and hopefully you all the way through November keep that strong leadership at the county, and voters willing, maybe we'll have a friend at the state. So just want to thank you again for all the time you spend in your partnership here and taking time out to work with us. So next we will move on to Alex, I think, Iskandarian. I do think Lone Mountain Land Company president. Did you join us?
I'm here.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Alex.
Can you can hear me okay?
Yes, everything's fine. Very good.
Okay. Well, thanks, Daryl. I appreciate the invitation to be here today. I just talk a little bit about what we've been seeing up in Big Sky. I very much enjoy talking to this group when we do it in person, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do that a little later in the summer or fall. But Big Sky, kind of going to the one comment I would make, just kind of picking up on where Commissioner Seifert was, when this all kind of hit in March, he mentioned he was following the basketball. And I think a lot of people have viewed all of this through the basketball prism. And, when I first realized, obviously there had been rumblings about COVID-19, and we've been hearing about some of the impacts overseas and things like that. But I got to tell you, when it really hit home with me, when I said, there might be really something going on here, was when they started canceling the March Madness and all the college basketball games and the college tournaments. And I said, wow, this is not just a little flu outbreak or something like this. This is going to be something that has more meaningful and more long-term impacts. And I will tell you, it's certainly been the case. Going back to kind of what things looked like in Big Sky in January and February for us, I would echo what a few of the speakers have said. We were having an excellent year in Big Sky. I know you're going to be hearing from the Yellowstone, Frank from the Yellowstone Club, and Taylor from Big Sky Resort here in a second. But we were having a very, very good year in Big Sky. Speaking just for Lone Mountain Land Company, Moonlight Basin, Town Center, Spanish Peaks Mountain Club, our construction projects were proceeding, very well on schedule. We were having a very good sales year, and I would even say, better than just good. We were having a very good year. Things were looking good. The economy was strong. We had a lot of buyers coming into town. We had sold more properties, more real estate properties. We had actually sold more real estate properties between December 2019 and March of 2020, we had sold more properties in those kind of 4.5 months or so than we had the entire previous year. So we were actually doing quite well. And then, of course, everything kind of hit the skids, hit the brakes. Obviously the biggest economic engine for us here in Big Sky is Taylor's Resort, Big Sky Resort. And when they shut down that weekend in March, or announced that they were closing that weekend in March, that really was a game changer for us. And at that point, the economy really slowed down here in Big Sky, as it did most places. You know, one positive way of looking at this, I do think there's some positives to take away from all of this that we're going through, as Commissioner Seifert was just mentioning. And you know, one positive that I would say is, looking back on this, is as devastating as this can be from an economic standpoint. I'm just speaking from an economic standpoint now, but as devastating as this will be and can be to Big Sky's economy, boy, it sure could have been a whole lot worse had this happened in December or something like that. The fact of the matter is we got the bulk of our ski season in, we got the bulk of our winter in, and yeah, we certainly lost two very, very strong, what are typically two very, very strong weeks at the end of March. Those last 2 weeks of March are good weeks for us. And then, you know, a few weeks in April, yeah, we lost those. But had we lost December, January, February, we might be singing a slightly different song right now. So things were going very, very well. Then they canceled the basketball tournament, and everything kind of slowed down from there. In terms of what happened at that point, boy, a whole lot has happened between that March 15th timeframe and now. And I'll kind of break it up into two different categories. One, what the Big Sky community has done, which I'll touch on, and I'm sure some of the other speakers may touch on as well. And then what we're seeing from more of a business standpoint. But immediately, I would say, I mean, very, very shortly after the ski resort announced they were closing, this community leapt into action. And we established something called the Big Sky Relief Fund, where we raised $2 million in virtually a week or 2 or 3 weeks. And we had put $2 million together. We purchased some ventilators, that could be used both at Big Sky and Bozeman. We at the Big Sky Medical Center here in Big Sky, which is an arm of the Bozeman Health. We actually only had one true, completely fitted out hospital room, and we had 3 other rooms that were slated for completion, sometime in the future. We've actually went in and started completing those. So that work is underway, again, in anticipation of a outbreak or something like that, which fortunately we haven't had to deal with. The Big Sky Relief Fund was primarily created by 4 main players. It was our resort tax board, which we had some reserves in our resort tax board, and they were able to contribute a lot of money from the resort tax funds to this Big Sky Relief Fund. And then we have 3 fairly substantial community foundations here in Big Sky. We have the Yellowstone Club Community Foundation, we have the Spanish Peaks Community Foundation, and the Moonlight Basin Community Foundation. And those 3 foundations all came together, and with a major fundraising effort, between all the community foundations and the resort tax, we were able to raise $2 million for those very, very needed causes. So it was quite impressive, I thought, at how quickly the community coalesced. We knew right out of the gate that we were going to feel the pain in a small, very tourism-based economy like ours. It's very seasonal. Frankly, April and May was going to be certainly May and early June, they were going to be slow for us anyway. right? We know that. We wouldn't be doing a lot of business right now, or we'd just be getting into our summer season now anyway. And so to have that shoulder season start essentially a month early, and then have it come with all the uncertainty about what the summer was going to look like, particularly at that point. It was great to have those community resources kind of coalesce behind the effort. And I feel like we were well situated for, if there is, and I certainly hope there's not, but if there is a second outbreak or something like this happens in the future, I feel like we're much, much more well situated now than we were a month ago or 2 months ago. So, from a community standpoint, that was big. We've finished out the hospital. The other thing I would mention from a community standpoint that I think is worth mentioning is in the middle of all this, we had an election here in Big Sky, and we had 2 ballot tax questions on, one for the school district and one for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. And both of them passed by quite overwhelming margins. So it's good to see that even in kind of the depth of this uncertainty and whatnot, people in Big Sky are kind of looking at the long term. They are seeing the light at the other end of the tunnel on this, and they're saying we need to be planning for the long term. We need to make sure our school has the facilities that they're going to need to grow with our community. We need to make sure we have the wastewater capacity that we need to grow. And everyone was quite encouraged to see that people were taking a long-term view on that. From a business standpoint, boy, it's been a crazy couple of months, I can tell you. Right as many of you know, right as we got into this, there were all kinds of decisions that needed to be made, and they were, not to use the dreaded overused word, but the unprecedented decisions, right? I mean, we're making decisions in contexts that we really hadn't addressed before. And so, do we close everything down? How are we going to address this? How are we going to handle employees? Are we going to send our J1 employees who come from other countries? Are we going to send them home? How are we going to handle our workforce housing? Just a whole host of questions that we were grappling with. And it was interesting because the other overused word, or another overused word you hear a lot here, is about how fluid the situation was, and fluidity. But boy, I tell you, we'd be making decisions, and a couple hours later, the decision wasn't good anymore, right? We had to revisit it because it was things were moving that quickly. We are proud to say that we, at all of our clubs, we paid our employees through what would have been their normal work release, through the date that they would have left their jobs anyway. So that was a real positive for us. But we made a lot of decisions just in terms of closing the clubs. Obviously, the ski resort had made the decision to close the ski resort. And so at that point, it's just kind of been regrouping, trying to keep everything afloat. We have a number of, as I've talked to this group before, in some of our face-to-face meetings, we have a number of construction projects, active construction projects going right now, all across Big Sky. Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks, Moonlight Basin, Town Center, residential, commercial, you name it. We have all kinds of construction projects going on. The single largest right now being the Montage Hotel, which is under construction. And just to give you a feeling of magnitude for that project, today on the Montage, there's approximately 400 people on that site today. So we have all of that construction going on up here. And there was a couple of weeks of uncertainty. What's going on here? Do we need to shut these jobs down? The governor came out with his directive in which, fortunately, and we believe correctly, construction was deemed essential. And so our construction projects did continue going forward. I think that was a positive. Obviously, we did experience some impacts. But really not as much as you might think. I mean, we certainly lost some productivity. I would say at the depth of the productivity, we were maybe down to 50% productivity on our jobs, something like that. And that came from a couple of places. One, we had situations where people weren't coming to work. Some people just weren't coming to work. We didn't have anything close to a major outbreak or anything like that, but we did have some positive tests. The Montage projects had a few positive tests, and our other projects had a few scattered positive tests. That impacted people showing up for work. And then the other thing is that we're taking on the construction jobs, we're taking the social distancing very, very seriously. And that creates some delays as well, right? You can't put 3 different subs in a room. You can't have the tile guy in there with the drywall guy, with the paint guy all at the same time, the way you typically would. Now you have to sequence them in one at a time. And so that causes delays. So we have seen some delays. Like I said, I think we may have gotten down to as low as 50% productivity, kind of using an average across the board. But right now, as we sit here today, I think we're pretty darn close back up to 100%. I mean, our jobs are moving. And yes, we've lost some time. I was talking to one of our project managers today about a home that was scheduled to be done in July. And I was just, so, now kind of dealing with everything we've had to deal with. What do you think? And he said, I think it's going to be done in August. So, it's those types of delays that we're looking at, not anything more serious than that. And then, just in terms of predictions for the rest of 2020, I mean, that's a tough one. One thing we are definitely seeing and hearing and feeling is that people want to be in Montana. I mean, this is we actually think, if anything, attention and interest in Montana and places like Montana has actually increased since this has started. Now, the lifting of the 14-day quarantine was huge. I think people were very gun shy to come out here while that was in place. I think the lifting of that on June 1st will be huge. We're starting to see bookings pick up. We're starting to hear about people who are planning trips here. More and more people are driving. I know that's not good news for Brian necessarily, but so, look, I think it's going to be a different summer. Don't get me wrong. I mean, for those of you who are familiar with Big Sky, a big kind of centerpiece, if you will, of summers in Big Sky are Thursday night concerts. We have a park right in town center there, and we bring in kind of regional and national acts, and it's kind of a gathering for the whole community. And those have been canceled. We won't be holding those concerts this summer. The good news, speaking of that particular area of town center, is we have broke ground. When I say we, in this case, it's the Big Sky Community Organization. We have broke ground on a $15 million community center that we're building here in town. We just broke ground on that just a few weeks ago. So things are moving forward. I think it's going to be an unusual summer. It's going to be a different summer without the concerts, and certainly with the social distancing and the protocols in place. We are going to be communicating out to our clubs, the Yellowstone Club, the Moonlight Basin Club, and Spanish Peaks Mountain Club. We are going to be communicating to them actually over the next three to 5 days. We're going out to the memberships with Zoom calls similar to this, inviting all the memberships, and we'll be walking through in detail kind of our operating policies and how we're going to be approaching the summer. People are making travel plans. We are at a minimum, I would just summarize those. We are at a minimum, we are following the governor's directives and the CDC recommendations. In some cases, we're even being a little more stringent than that. We're grappling a little bit with our mask policy. We don't quite have that 100% dialed in, but that's certainly an important issue. For whatever reason, that feels almost as if it's become a bit politicized even, and we're trying to stay certainly above that, and just keeping the health of our members and our employees and the greater community as priority number one. We are going to be opening the clubs. We will be opening the golf courses. We will be opening there will be dining. There may be limited, restricted dining, but there will be dining. Swimming pools, fitness, we're still kind of working through how we're going to handle those a little bit, but we think we will be opening fitness. We may be doing fitness on a kind of an appointment-based model where you make an appointment, you you come and we allow 6 or 8 people into the fitness facility to do their workout, they leave, we do a cleaning, and then the next appointment comes in, kind of that type of an approach. But we are going to be opening and we are going to be communicating this information to our membership and to the greater community here over the course of the next couple of days. I do think that there's a silver lining in all of these challenges, as Commissioner Seifert was mentioning. And, I think these have been challenging times, certainly unique times. None of us have ever experienced anything like this. But I look at it and I do think the Big Sky community, what was already a close-knit community, I would tell you, has become even more close-knit and more has more unified behind just making sure that our community thrives and continues to look at the long term. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Alex, thank you. Appreciate you taking time, and not too bad for thinking this was in October, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My communication with Alex somehow got crossed. He was thinking this was in October. There was no rush till we got the invite that you're on at 12:45 tomorrow morning. So thank you for that, Alex, and thanks for your partnership down here too with the airport and with the Bozeman Chamber. We really do appreciate it for taking time out.
Thank you, Darrell. We really appreciate working with you guys as well.
Thanks. Up next, Frank Casito, CEO, Yellowstone Club. Frank, thanks for hanging in there, and we'll go to you next.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk about Big Sky. Quite proud of what the community has done. I think Alex has gone through and talked a little bit about how we've come together, but and I was going to touch on a little bit of that, and I will in a bit. Let's talk about sort of what the winter was. The winter was fantastic. Snow conditions were great. Skiing was wonderful. Everything looked like it was on its right trajectory. We just every single weekend or big weekend, we seemed to set records with visitation. Everybody was here. Everybody was loving it. It was a good vibe. We had opened up a barn, which is a big convention center on property here for the membership. And we had some really great concerts that had started, and we had scheduled to have some really great concerts that were intended to be fundraising events for our community foundation. And we were excited about those. And as you're watching and monitoring what was going on in the world, you started to question those things. And to like Alex's point, you'd make a decision and you'd say, okay, well, we're going to limit to 700 people. And then that wouldn't make any sense. And then it would limit even more. And you ended up ultimately having to cancel those events. It wasn't a decision that we wanted to make, but we postponed those events. We'll have them, but we had to do that. From the ski hill, it was sort of the same thing. Being outside was fantastic and it was safe, but you started spreading people out on chairlifts and limiting gondola capacities and the like. And so you started to do those things as you were kind of coming towards the crux of the ultimate hard decision, which was closure of the ski hill. And that happened for us on the 16th of March. And again, like I said, it wasn't an easy decision, but what it did do is, as Alex had said, it gave us the opportunity. We had all of our seasonal employees compensated through the end of their scheduled winter departure date. We actually promoted work from home for our roughly 350 full-time year-round employees, for those that could work from home. For those that couldn't work from home, meaning that they had a job here on property, we paid them. We paid them for their time, even though they weren't able to come back to work. So that was something that we were quite proud of. And we had a few hundred H-2B visa employees here on property that in a 48-hour period, we were able to get them back to the country that they lived in. And so that was a great effort on a lot of people's parts here at the team. And if anybody who was in employee housing didn't have a place to go, we let them stay. We kept them there, and they could stay as long as they wanted to stay. And when we would spread people out, we have the development business as well. So just like Alex was mentioning, we kept working through that period of time. We Probably down to about the lowest point, 75% capacity or efficiency, I would say, on our projects. Our projects were easier to spread out, not nearly as big and concentrated as Alex's project. But to date now, we have nearly 1,000 contractors coming through the gates building stuff every single day. So we've been able to keep people employed through that avenue as well. And then we started bringing people back, our full-time year-round employees, on the 27th. Of April, and with that, and enforcing pretty strict. We have testing at the gate, temperature testing, and the like at the gate. Everybody gets a pass to come in with their temperature reading. You know, it allows us to do something. And then when we are working here now, we are socially distancing. If you're not able to do that, we encourage you to wear a mask, but we're limiting the number of people that can be in cars, etc. And following, you know, the phased approach guidelines, and certainly phase 2 gives us more flexibility than it has been in phase 1. But Montana's shown to be just an amazing place, and particularly I'm amazed by Big Sky. But we've had more than 100 homes, people and residents occupying in those homes, which during the shoulder season didn't exist. And so, you know, we've been offering food options, even though the restaurants are closed, but to-go food options with the effort of, you know, keeping people fed, keeping all those people out of the grocery stores, particularly at the beginning of the shutdown, when it was unclear as to what food delivery would look like. And so we did do those things, and we kept those going. And so we focused on that. And then also the community came together, as Alex mentioned. We went ahead with the Big Sky Relief Fund, and we were able to raise all of that money. The Big Sky Chamber facilitated the Save Small Business Relief Fund, where we were able to give $210,000 out to businesses that were in need. We also have, through YCCF, an avenue to help individuals that are struggling through this process. So we've been focused on community, and we've been focused on our employees, and that hasn't changed at all. Phase 2, or at least the opening, we plan to open at the same time. June 19th is our scheduled opening date, and it's gonna be open, but it will look different. Our restaurants will open. They'll be at limited capacity, just like any other restaurant. You know, if we can't socially distance, you know, we won't have groups of more than 50 people. And so that limited some of the big events that we ended up having, and we just kind of delay those, and we'll change those. But there's enough stuff to do in Big Sky, and there's enough stuff to do around in the greater area of Montana that it's still going to be an incredibly desirable place. I do think that, and we're seeing some of it, and we've heard some of it, but I do think that you're going to see people who, when Boston opens up again, or New York, or some of the hubs where a lot of our membership is, they're going to come here. And they're going to come here, and we already know that they're going to come here, and they're planning to stay longer time. So rather than coming in for a weekend here and there and bouncing back and forth, they're talking about staying here, you know, 4 or 8 weeks, long periods of time, particularly since the being able to work remotely, and some of the tools that we had, and sort of stigma that's gone away from that. People can work from wherever they have an internet connection now, and so that's what they're choosing to do. But yeah, like I said, I'm glad to be a member of you know, Montana and the Big Sky community. I've come out here for, you know, work, particularly a couple of years ago, and every single time something like this, nothing like this has happened, but any time that the community has come together, it never seems to shock me. So proud to be here, and appreciate everybody wanting to hear what we're doing up here in the mountain.
Thank you, Frank. Again, I want to thank your participation too with the airlines, and then Brian's team that we put together, and your continued support, even for Bozeman projects that are here. So we couldn't do it without you, and glad that things are going well at Yellowstone Club and in Big Sky. So thanks for taking time today out of your schedule too. So next, we'll have Taylor Middleton. He's the President General Manager at Big Sky Resort. So Taylor, thank you for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I hope everybody's doing okay. On February 15th, entrepreneurism was alive and well in Big Sky. We've had countless small businesses crop up and open restaurants and open retail, and the business environment was fantastic, as you've heard from some others on this call. Capital investment, whether it be heavy capital like ski lifts or transportation companies or restaurants, there was just a tremendous amount of capital being pumped in by small businesses, in addition to what you heard Alex and Frank talk about, that are investment that's coming from major businesses. Peaking visitation, this whole region of Montana and certainly Big Sky has been on a peaking growth pattern of about 15% a year on average growth in resort tax revenues over the last 5 consecutive years, year-over-year growth. And then the brand of Big Sky has continued to grow into a national and dabbling in international recognition. And that was all peaking. And on March the 15th, that all changed dramatically. We heard Dr. Cruzado talking about hoping to manage to the COVID in a controlled situation. We used that word as we started anticipating what might be happening around the world. We were watching Austria and Switzerland, and we started watching Colorado. And we thought we were going to be able to do a controlled wind down. And in the course of 18 hours, that all fell apart. And it went into chaos and an uncontrolled closing, which at the time, we didn't know if it was the right decision or the wrong decision, but we felt it needed to be done. And we closed not only Big Sky Resort, but all of the operations of Boyne across the nation, because we had seen what had happened in Ischgl, Austria, and those major outbreaks. And we could tell, although we know a lot more of the science now than we did then, we could tell that assembling masses of people together was just a bad thing. So we pulled the plug. That's a whole different story of how that evolved over 18 hours. And I must say this, it was not unrecognized to us that it was not only a decision for Boyne Resorts and for Big Sky Resort that was going to affect us, but we knew it would be economically devastating for our entire community, especially these smaller businesses. And I spent the rest of that day talking to a lot of those people. How do we reopen? What's the rebirth? That's the real issue that we all want to know. And like everybody knows on this call, nobody knows how that's going to look exactly. But I will tell you that there are 7 factors that we are watching, that all of you are watching, and that are going to dictate how this reopening looks. And of course, it's governmental guidelines. Big Sky Resort, we're not going to be rebels. We're going to follow the guidelines of social consciousness that are put forth by local governmental agencies, county, state, federal. Air, we heard Brian talk about the issues with air. That's going to affect how guests get here, as well as Yellowstone National Park. We're watching the best practices. That's number 3 on our list. The best practices are really changing daily, from masking to cleaning to social distancing, and we're building models around that. Number 4, the complexities of staffing. We house about 700 staff members in seasonal workforce housing, and most of them were in double occupancy. A few of them were in triple occupancy, and going forward until this COVID thing is resolved, it's going to be single occupancy. And then how do you get staff here? It's really hard to get an airline seat, and it's really expensive to get an airline seat, and a lot of our workers come from out of area, right? And then, of course, the travel patterns of guests, not just air availability, but who's willing to travel and what are their travel patterns going to be. Of course, next on the list is the sustainability of health. Can we and society open? Can colleges and universities and schools and clubs and businesses and governments open and get through the summer with more social contact without more outbreaks? And can we control this, especially going into the fall and winter? And then finally, financial modeling. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a university or a government or an entrepreneur. There's only so long that you can operate at a reduced level of business. Tourism and hospitality, and that's so important to the community of Big Sky and really the Gallatin Valley. That is the hardest hit of the business sectors from the COVID. The vast majority of Big Sky is tourism and hospitality, and the vast majority of businesses in Big Sky have been at zero revenue since March the 15th. So what do we do? Big Sky has identified 6, I call them our guiding principles of the COVID planning process. Number one, we have to recognize that the business model has changed. It's going to take us several years to get back to normal. You saw the airport data that Brian presented of how long it's going to take air travel to get back to normal, but it's much deeper than that. It's going to be a while. So our business models, we have to pivot to a new type of business model. 2, traveler origins are changing. Certainly in the short time, there'll be a lot more drivers, a lot more locals. Air travel is not going to come back as fast as drive travel will. So we have to change the way we promote market, right, as a community. 3rd, we have to operate differently, and everybody on this phone call knows what I mean by that. 4, we have to be really flexible because it's going to keep changing. Look how much it has changed since March the 10th. And it's going to keep changing just as rapidly. And all of us have to maintain dry powder and flexibility in our business models. 5, the COVID, this is not a short-term event. Hunker down for the long term and make sure that the business models and the health models and the societal models are going to endure for a long-term event. And then number 6, we're all leaders. Everybody on this phone call is a leader. Every presentation I've heard today has been given by a leader. We need to take responsibility to make good decisions, to be good leaders, and lead our nation and our state and our town. That's what I got.
Taylor, thank you very much for taking time out. And I know the history between Boyne and goes back to Gallatin Field and long before I got here. So thank you for Big Sky Resort. And again, the asset that you have with the 3 of you and the partnership here with the Chamber of Commerce, let us know what we can do. Normally, you're always there for us. And we just want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule today too. And like I said, we're resilient. We'll get through this. And as long as we keep the great partnerships that we have and the leadership that we have involved, our county is going to come out pretty good on this. So thank you very much.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Next up, I think Matt Kelly, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We sure can, Matt. Thank you for joining us. I know you have had a lot of meetings today, and Matt's I don't have to introduce Matt anymore, I guess, Gallatin County Health Officer. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt. Give us an update.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when people have to introduce me again and people can't remember what I do anymore. That'll be, I think, comforting to all of us. I apologize for being a little bit late. We had a 5-hour Board of Health meeting today where the board was able to move through an emergency rulemaking process to move us into phase 2 of the reopening. It really, the most of the rule, the most substantive parts of the rule were really all about following the lead that the governor set in the reopening. allowing businesses to go from 50 to 75% where social distancing can still happen. Group size limit went from 10 to 50. Those are the most substantial aspects of it. And someone made reference a minute ago to some aspects of this are becoming political. And I think there was some non-binding language in there related to face mask use that doesn't require anybody to use face masks. It just recommends that certain businesses consider mandatory face masks to protect their employees. Not a requirement, not something that's even enforceable. And that created quite a stir, quite a bit of concern. And I think we're also trying to wrestle with, in opening up the group size limitation, the governor threw to local boards or local health departments the job of figuring out how the larger groups can socially distance, and gave us the job of trying to cipher out what larger groups can be socially distanced and what can't. That's created some concern. It's tricky. I mean, this is a difficult situation to be in. I can say going back to mid-March, I think it was March 13th, March 17th, something like that. I gathered some of my colleagues from the county and the city together, and we had a press conference. And one of the things that I think some people thought was odd at that point in time is when we started that, and it seems like a million years ago, but at that time, the outbreak was really centered around China and one particular part of China. We were really concerned about people of Asian descent, kind of suffering from prejudice and being singled out. And so one of the things I said really early on was that we were intent on moving through this pandemic in a way that was unifying, in a way that brought people together. And as we have gone through it, certainly in that first month, that was sort of a transcendent feeling that a lot of people had. As we've moved farther away from the beginning, as we've had some success reducing the number of cases, holding that together has been more challenging. And there's been politics thrown into that in a number of ways that has made it increasingly challenging. But I will say that I continue to be committed to dealing with this in a unifying way, to spend more time listening than talking, although that's a challenge sometimes, it feels like. And that whether it's, political unification or city-county unification, whatever the case may be, we're the city-county health department. We serve everybody, and we're really intent and determined to continue to address this through that lens. A lot of what we end up talking about, a lot of what we end up having control over are policies and emergency rules, guidance, that sort of thing. At the end of the day, though, with all that stuff, a lot of this really comes down to personal responsibility, both for ourselves and for the people next to us. We have, yesterday marked the sad occasion of passing 100,000 people in this country who have died of this disease since over the last 90 days. That is incredibly sad and difficult to think about. And it's even harder to think about it here because we've had some success at reducing the amount of disease in the community. I will say that last night before I went home, we got a call. We do have a case. We're now managing a case in Gallatin Valley. The disease, I don't think, ever really totally left. Now we're starting to pick up cases here and there. I'm hoping that's where it stays. I'm hoping we can continue to manage cases and get in there and reduce transmission, and that people have learned how to live with this in a way that if they do get sick, they're staying home. But I'll say as we open up, it's going to be a challenge. As we open up businesses, as we make group sizes bigger, I think the governor is going to announce later today that he's going to support Yellowstone swinging the gates sometime early in June. As those things happen, we bring thousands of visitors to the county from all over the country, where we, almost everywhere other than Montana has more disease and more cases than we do. we're preparing to deal with that and doing our best to build our capacity and our resources. One of the things that we did very early on in this pandemic is we added staff to work directly with long-term care facilities. You know, those are businesses that really operate on a low margin with some pretty high risk during a pandemic. So we hired an individual. We don't get any direct funding to do senior services. We hired an individual that we had a lot of confidence in, and he has been really essential in making connection with those facilities to make sure that they're putting in place policies, that they have PPE. Now we're doing more surveillance testing in those centers. And, you know, knock on wood, we've been successful preventing, you know, large scale outbreaks in those kinds of facilities, which is really one of the, not the only, but one of the big drivers of mortality that we're seeing in other parts of the country. You know, I've seen numbers upwards of 1/3 of our deaths are occurring in those long-term care facilities. So we're going to really continue to focus on that. And the other thing we're doing that is really relevant to businesses and keeping businesses open is expanding and continuing to build our ability to do contact tracing, so that when we do, like last night, when we had a case reported, we're in touch with that person, we're getting that person isolated, and then we're identifying close contacts, getting those close contacts tested, getting them under quarantine so that we're reducing the amount of disease transmission. I'll say that the more I go through this, the longer we deal with this virus, the more humbling it becomes. We're learning more every day, but as we learn more questions arise. There's significant questions now about asymptomatic transmission and pre-symptomatic transmission that really make it very difficult sometimes to make decisions from a public health perspective. Some of that guidance has changed over the course of the pandemic. It's a new bug. We've only been living with it in human beings for 5 or 6 months. And it's a new, we've certainly had epidemics before, but we've never had one in the economic and social context that we have right now. So that's all challenging. I will say, somebody else mentioned, I think Commissioner Seifert mentioned Patrick Lonergan and our incident command team. I'll say that's the money that we've worked with Patrick for a long time. He's been a partner, but he's been kind of a partner in an indirect way. Over the past 3 months, he's been a partner in a very direct way. And it's been, I have had plenty of nights where I've lost sleep the past 3 months. But what I've not lost sleep about is the fact that we have a really excellent emergency manager in Gallatin County who has put his full weight behind this push, brought in resources from law enforcement, brought in logistics management resources, things that we just could never have done on our own as a health department. And while we're the focus, and I kind of tend to be the focus sometimes, what I think is important is that, and I've been saying this since the beginning, you know, a month or two ago, the most common question I was getting was, why are there so many cases in Gallatin County? Today, the most common question I'm getting from reporters is, why don't we have more cases in Gallatin County? I like that question better. I don't have great answers for it. I don't have definitive answers for it. But being able early on, because of who we are, the character of who we are, people want to be here. We're the front yard, backyard of Yellowstone National Park. We have a growing, thriving university. We have a burgeoning economy. Those things make our community strong in so many ways. They also bring some risk, and so we have to take the good things with those risks. And so we've really tried to make sure that we're taking advantage of the assets that we have here, connecting to our partners at, whether it's MSU or Bozeman Health, community health partners, making sure that our incident commands are connected. You know, and the other thing I would say is, I think we need to be careful. I need to be careful about speaking about all this in the past tense. We're in the very, very early stages of our summer here. It's even just spring, and we just don't know what's going to happen. Anybody who tells you they know exactly what's going to happen, I would be suspicious of them. We don't know. We're hoping that we can continue to have a relatively quiet summer in terms of the number of cases that we have. The last thing that I want to have to think about doing is going in reverse on this reopening. Closing down was hard. Reopening has been about 5 times harder. And I can't imagine how hard it would be to have to go in reverse if we get there. So I am pulling back the reins in some things. I'm trying to be careful. I'm trying to raise awareness. I'm trying to get people to think responsibly and to take action responsibly. But there's just an awful lot we don't know. There's significant risk with reopening, and we're doing our best to manage that with a lot of the great partners we have. So with that, I'll be ready to take questions. I've had enough speechifying today, but I'd be happy to take questions later on if I can be of assistance. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership and most of all, what we're hearing from the business community. Thanks for the clarity that you give your messages to our community. It doesn't give a hesitation one way or the other, which I think all of us as leaders, when we're dealing with the tourism or travelers that are coming through, the comforting fact is we can let them know exactly what the expectations that are set by our county health department. And these are the guidelines we'd ask you to respect while you're in our environment. So just know that we do appreciate what you're doing. And regardless of the decisions that you're making, you never can please everybody, but we just want to thank you for your leadership, endless hours that you put in and helping our economy come back as strong as it can, but as safely as it can within those guidelines. So with that, Matt, since he opened it, if somebody has a question, you can unmute yourself and I'll have you ask Matt a question. I know you've given almost 2.5 hours of your time today. If not, you can email us the questions. We'll get them to Matt and get it back to you too. So I know, Matt, you've had a long day of meetings. Does anybody have a direct question for Matt or? I think you answered everything very well then.
Great.
So,
That's good news.
Yes, that is. Again, we're seeing the same thing. We want to thank all of our members that were on the call today. We couldn't do it without your continued participation, and hope we can all enjoy the summer and enjoy it safely. And thank you again for joining us today on this call. We appreciate it. Speakers, thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to spend 2 hours with our membership here. Greatly appreciated on behalf of the Bozeman Area Chamber of Commerce. And again, we'll get together with Matt, work on an October 6th, maybe a live date, depending on what happens here going into the future.
Thank you all. Matt Calley, thank you a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Yeah. Be safe out there.
Thank you.